Welcome to your science lesson today. You should have sent me in your animal report projects, your good copy, and your interview should be finished. So since that's done, we are going to be moving away from animals that currently live on our planet and looking today at animals that are extinct. So we have had many different animals that have lived on our planet, but sadly a lot of them have become extinct. So what does extinct actually mean? Well, it means that something no longer exists. So in the case of extinct animals, this means that they are no longer alive, which is actually really sad. So there's something in common about all of these animals, and I'm wondering if you can figure it out, and also if you've heard of them. So let me know if you have not heard of any of these animals or the ones that you know. I think you definitely will know some of them. So one is a dodo, then we have a mammoth, Sabertooth Tiger, a West African black rhino, a Tasmanian tiger, and dinosaurs. So what do you think is the same about all of these animals? What do they all have in common? Well, if you guess that they are extinct, you are right. None of these animals that were on the last page actually exist anymore. So let's take a look at each of them individually and see what happened. So we're starting off with dinosaurs because they became extinct about 65 million years ago, which is a really, really, really long time. And at the same time that dinosaurs became extinct, there was actually a mass extinction, and 70% of all animal life on Earth actually died out. So 70% of all of the animals and plants, they all died out. But scientists don't know why. Some of them think that there was a giant asteroid that hit Earth. Some of them think there was a huge volcanic eruption. And some of them think that there was an ice age and the dinosaurs couldn't live in the cold, changing cold weather, and their plants and things died out that they needed to eat. So we don't know what happened to them for sure, but we do know that they were reptiles, and we also know that the word dinosaurs actually means terrible lizard. So the person who found the first dinosaur got to name them, and he named them terrible lizard, but I think it's like in Latin or something. Dinosaurs existed for 165 million years. I personally don't know anyone who's been alive for 165 million years. The oldest person that I know who's been alive is my grandma, and she's 100. You guys sang her happy birthday for her birthday this year, so you know that too. But I don't know anyone who's 165 million years, but let me know if you guys do. That's kind of cool. And we also know that the largest dinosaurs, which were the Brachiosaurus and the Apatosaurus, they were actually herbivores. So they just ate plants and leaves and things like that. And they are massive and huge. So can you imagine how many plants they would have needed to fill themselves up? That's crazy. So moving on, we leave the dinosaurs and we come up to about 55 million years ago to 11,000 years ago. So a little bit closer to 2020. And we are talking about saber-toothed cats, but we know them probably better as saber-toothed tigers. Now, saber-toothed tigers, or cats, they are carnivores, and they are named because of their saber-tooth-like teeth, which you guys all know. They have like the two fangs on the front of their mouths. Now, it's believed, again, from scientists, because there were no scientists around at the time, that saber-toothed cats were really good hunters, and they actually hunted animals such as sloths and mammoths. Now, if you think about it, the sloths that we have now were not the same kind of sloths that lived with saber-toothed cats. They were actually giant sloths. So just, a lot more bigger, let's say a lot more bigger than the sloths that we have today. And you guys should know that a mammoth is actually bigger than an elephant. So can you imagine like a lion taking down an elephant? That's pretty impressive. But lions hunt together, so they think that a saber-toothed cat actually could take down a woolly mammoth or a giant sloth, which is pretty impressive if you think about it, because they're much, much, much smaller. Now, again, scientists aren't really sure what happened to make the saber-toothed tigers extinct, but there's two reasons. One is they think that there was a climate change, which means that the weather either got too hot for them or too cold, and that means that their food probably would have died out because their food, obviously they're carnivores, so they eat herbivores, and herbivores need to eat plants. So if their plants aren't available, then they would have died, and that means the saber-toothed cats don't have any food because their prey would have died as well. But they also think that maybe it was competition with humans, and that's because there were humans around at this time, a long time ago, and they think that humans actually hunted the saber-toothed cats' food, so they would hunt mammoths and sloths as well. So they don't know if the humans maybe overkilled, they overhunted the mammoths and sloths, and that's what, so the saber-toothed cats didn't have any food, or maybe they actually killed the saber-toothed cats because the saber-toothed cats were trying to eat the food that the humans were trying to eat, which were the mammoths and sloths. So they're not really 100% sure, but they know that it had something to do, or they think it had something to do with the fact that the saber-toothed cats' food supply kind of disappeared. And this was one of that food supply. Part of the saber-toothed cat's diet was the woolly mammoth. Now, the woolly mammoth is over 4 meters tall and could weigh over 6 tons, which is massive. It's huge. I actually have a picture of me standing with this guy. This is a model in a museum. And he is actually I only go up to like right here, the bottom of his trunks. So if you think about how tall I am, if you can remember, then I only went to about there. So obviously they are called the woolly mammoth, and that's because they are covered in fur and they had really long tusks. Okay, so people think that they're related to elephants because they look a lot like elephants. They just look like a woolly elephant, really. And the woolly mammoth actually went extinct itself about 10,000 years ago, and this was because of humans hunting it, but also because their habitat changed because of climate change. So they lived kind of during an ice age time, and so as the world warmed up and got a little bit hotter, then they lost a lot of their food and shelter and things like that. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means later on. So next up we have a dodo bird. So we've moved now, we're in the 1680s, which is a lot closer to 2020, only about 300-400 years away. Now the dodo bird was a chubby flightless bird, and you can see its tiny little wings right there, and it lived in Mauritius. I don't know if any of you guys have been to Mauritius, but it's an island. And on this island, what happened was that the bird was very chill and it lived very happily by itself, and nobody came to bother it, and it was kind of the king of its castle until some Dutch sailors arrived. And the Dutch sailors were like, "Ooh, this looks like a tasty bird," and they actually hunted the bird so they could eat it. So that was one of the reasons why the dodo went extinct, because the sailors were very hungry and they hunted all of the birds. But another reason was that on the boats were animals such as cats and pigs and rats, and these animals actually ate the dodo eggs and the dodo bird's food. So like we've talked about with life cycle, if you don't have eggs, then your eggs don't grow up to become adults, right? So if your eggs get eaten, then you can't have baby dodo birds. And eventually what happened was, because the Dutch sailors were hunting and eating the dodo birds, like the big adults, and then the cats and the rats were eating the dodo eggs, that the dodo bird actually died out. So it was because of humans, which is very, very, very sad. Next up, we have a Tasmanian tiger, and the last Tasmanian tiger was alive in 1936. So this is actually a real picture of what a Tasmanian tiger lived like, or looked like. I'm sorry it's black and white, but they didn't have color photographs in 1936, sadly. Tasmanian tigers lived in Tasmania, Australia, and New Guinea, and it was once the world's largest eating marsupial. So if you remember, marsupials are animals that have like a little pouch, and those are animals like koalas and kangaroos. So as you can see, it looks a little bit like a wolf, but it actually had a yellow-brown fur and stripes, which you can see here, and then a long tail. So there's its tail there. And there's a few reasons why the Tasmanian tiger became extinct. So there was some disease and habitat loss, but ultimately, again, just like the dodo bird, it was human beings that killed the Tasmanian tiger and made them extinct. So because they were meat eaters, they actually enjoyed eating sheep and other livestock, so like cows and horses and things. And the people who lived in Tasmania and Australia and New Guinea, they were not happy because obviously they needed these animals to live themselves. So in Tasmania, actually the government said, right, nope, we need to live, we're more important, and they said you can kill all of the Tasmanian tigers and you'll get money. So anyone who killed a Tasmanian tiger actually was given money, which is extra sad. And eventually they only lived in zoos, and the last known Tasmanian tiger actually died in 1936 in a zoo in Australia, and that was the last time that we were able to see this creature on our planet, which is extra sad. Okay, this one is probably one of the newest ones we have, and it's the West African black rhino. So it's just like a normal rhino. It has two horns, right there you can see, and it's pretty big and it weighs a lot, just like a normal rhino that you've seen every day. They are herbivores as well. Now, black rhinos were actually killed again by humans, and they were actually, the reason why they were killed is because some people believe that their horns are able to make us feel better when we are sick. Even though doctors did not say that this was true, people still believed it. So they would actually kill the rhinoceros just to take their horns, which is really, really, really sad. So the last black rhino was actually seen in Cameroon in 2006, and 5 years later it was officially declared extinct. So in 2011, but the last one was seen in 2006. So even though people tried to protect it, they couldn't, which is very sad. So we've looked at some of the animals that have become extinct, but why do animals actually become extinct? So the most common cause of extinction is a change in habitat. And we know that habitats are required for animals because it gives them their food and their shelter and water, which are three of the things that they need to survive. So if their food supply is wiped out, then they don't have anything to eat, which means that they will die. So a change in habitat could be caused by floods, fires, droughts, which means there's no water, volcanoes, or other natural events. But people can also change the environment. And people do that by clearing forests, they drain wetlands, they build dams that disrupt the flow of rivers, and they build cities on land that animals need to survive. They also create pollution, which can change the habitat and then kind of cause extinction or can hurt the animals. So like I said, people are another very common cause of extinction. And some of that reason is because we have changed their habitat, but also because we hunt animals. And we hunt them for many different reasons. We hunt them for food, but we also hunt them for body parts. So things like their fur, their feathers, or their horns, like the rhino. And what happens is that we overhunt them. So that means that we want their food, that we need them to eat for us, or we want to have their fur for clothes, or we need their feathers or horns like they thought was for medicine. And basically what happens is we overhunt and we kill all of the animals, which is super sad. So natural forces, we talked a little bit about that, but so we have the change in climates, but there can also be things like an oil spill or other things that happen from natural forces like tornadoes. So anything in nature sometimes happen. I know there was like the forest fires in Australia earlier in the year, and that killed a lot of animals. Okay, so things like natural forces. Another thing is pollution. So like we said before, pollution from humans can actually kill off a species, and that's because that sewage, which is poisonous to some animals, it can go into the water, and then if it kills one species of animals, then the animal that maybe eats that species, they will die because their food is gone. So remember, it's the food chain that we were talking about. And then there's also the introduced species, and that was like in the dodo bird when the Dutch sailors brought these animals in. If the animal or a plant is not from that area, sometimes it can take over and it can actually kill off the other species because it wants to live more, it wants to survive. And what that can do is it can destroy another part of the food chain. So a lot of the reasons why these animals are dying off is either because humans are killing them or they're being in pollution, but a big part is their food chain is gone. So they can't get the food that they need or the space that they need or the water that they need. So those are some of the reasons why animals become extinct. So if you want to know more, there's 4 videos. There's actually one, the first video is a video about what it means to be extinct, so what extinct means. The second video is about 10 of the coolest extinct animals. Sadly, dinosaurs aren't on there, but it's a really cool video and you can actually see some of the animals. The next video is about dinosaurs, because I know you guys wanted to see some dinosaurs today. And then the last video is about animals that lived in the Ice Age, which are animals like mammoths and giant sloths, okay? So the next lesson, we're going to look at endangered animals, and we are going to look at how we can start protecting them so they don't become extinct like these animals. So there's nothing to submit today. You just had to sit through me chatting to you about some extinct animals. If you want to look up some extinct animals yourself, see if you can tell me what your favorite extinct animal is or was. And then on Thursday, we are going to look at endangered animals and how we can protect them and make sure that what happens to the dinosaurs and mammoths and dodo birds doesn't happen to them. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I look forward to seeing you again on Thursday.